Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's clear that the Trump administration has brought to light an issue that has been overlooked, but has disadvantaged the United States for years. U.S. trade relations with our partners around the globe must be realigned in a manner that promotes free and fair trade. And international organizations like the WTO must not stand in the way or make that goal harder to achieve. They need serious reforms, and they need to help us in that priority. When you look back several decades, free and fair trade was the priority of one of our finest presidents in American history. That's Ronald Reagan, who in his 1985 State of the Union called for a new multilateral negotiations platform that would lead to true progress in trade relations. His goal was to combat unfair and distortive trade practices, and he also understood, though, that the U.S. needed strong economic markets worldwide for U.S. goods. These goals and these discussions ultimately led to the creation of the World Trade Organization sometime later in 1994. These goals remain the same today: combat unfair and distortive trade practices, ensure strong markets with friends and allies for U.S. goods, and several other great ideals. But we have gotten askew a little bit. When operating correctly, the WTO can be a comprehensive trade negotiation platform that does allow economies from around the world to interact in a manner that was not possible before its creation, and that meets these goals. It's a platform that the U.S. can use to pursue free trade and push back against discriminatory trade measures, but reforms, transparency, and accountability must also exist. Ms. Shaw, I want to start with you. Since you have worked both in Congress and at the Office for the U.S. Trade Representative in Geneva and in D.C., your perspective on our steps forward with the WTO are very valuable. How do you think the U.S. can use our position at the WTO to promote free trade and work with our trading partners to advance priorities that will benefit all member countries?
Thank you, Congressman. I think it's a great question. Look, I think we've taken the WTO as far as I think the WTO can go in terms of negotiating new trade rules. I think right now it's about monitoring, transparency, and continuing to push our trading partners to abide by the commitments they've already committed to. When it comes to some of the more advanced trade rules, the China challenge, the other issues that we're facing, market failures, overstretched supply chains, we need to address these in other forum, through plurilateral negotiations with our trading partners, through these bilateral deals. But I think the WTO is really going to struggle to take some of those issues on. You've got 166 member countries, every single one of which has a veto. That's hard to overcome.
It is. The structure has been very difficult for us to get the results that we need that actually support American ideals, not undermine them. You said, I think you said to Jody Arrington just a little bit ago, that we've been working on reforms or proposed reforms for 25 years in the WTO without really getting anywhere that we needed to get with those reforms. So I'm curious, specifically, what do you think we need to do differently to achieve the results and the changes we need from within the WTO without expanding its scope or its or what it can handle, but actually the things that it's currently handling? How do we make it do better?
Yeah, I actually think some of the steps the president has taken in the last year have already helped. And we were talking earlier about the fact that the president got other countries through these bilateral negotiations to agree to reforms at the WTO. We've never had leverage like that before, and we've used it to better the institution and the organization. I think that's one way to make progress.
Mr. Ezell, I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you think specifically we need to do to turn the screws to make sure that we get the changes we need in the WTO?
Well, I'd like to associate myself with Kellyanne's comments, which is that we should use the vehicles that are available to us in the WTO to where they're appropriate and effective in advancing our interests, like the Information Technology Agreement, lowering global tariffs on trade and information technology goods. That's probably been the WTO's most successful plurilateral instrument. It's helped our exporters tremendously. Let's use the plurilateral instruments that we have at the WTO to great effect. We could add to that with a joint statement initiative on e-commerce. So defined areas within the WTO we can leverage and make progress on without having to deal with the reality that there is a veto and requires consensus to make rules.
For both you, Mr. Ezell, and Ms. Shaw, what other nation countries are supporting our efforts to change the things that need to happen in the WTO? Where are we getting support?
So a lot of our like-minded allies are at the point where they recognize the WTO needs serious reform, and on certain issues they see our point. but I don't think there's a meeting of the minds among all 166 countries on the types of reforms that are necessary. Even with the EU, we see some of the biggest gaps, so it's a challenge.
And I would add that on issues like the intellectual property rights, the COVID-19 IPR waiver, countries like Switzerland and the United Kingdom wanted the United States to stand up against India and South Africa on that waiver. But when the previous administration relented on that issue, support against it eroded. So there are countries and allies around the world that are counting on the United States to stand up, for the United States to stand up and show leadership in IP and digital trade rules of the WTO.
I agree with your statements there, Mr. Ezell, and I'll finish with this by saying the U.S. has to take a strong role in the WTO to make the reforms necessary to happen. We don't want to step away, let China get more influence in that organization or to push it further in a direction it does not need to go. But certainly we should not let ourselves be run over by the procedures and the structure of the WTO. We must stand with President Trump in his resetting of the trade world these days and make sure that we come out with freer and fairer trade on the backside, as Ronald Reagan initially said we should. Thank you. I yield back.